living longer, living healthier, living better than ever before. Welcome to Mountain Pacific's Healthy Living for Life, a weekly series that gives you the information, education, and expert insight you need to become an active participant in today's ever-changing healthcare climate. Here now is today's program host.
All our lives, we make choices. What to serve for dinner, where to go on vacation, and what to do with the weekend. As we age or become disabled or critically ill, a lot, if not all of our choices, end up getting made by others. Today, we talk about advanced care planning and what you can do today to make sure your choices will be honored tomorrow. I'm your host, Beth Brown, and this is Healthy Living for Life, a show dedicated to helping you do just that. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Today's first guest is Alice Hinshaw from Hinshaw Law Firm here in Helena. Welcome, Alice. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So today's show is trying to give folks an idea of advanced care planning. Can you start out by just giving us an overview of what that involves?
Advanced care planning means planning for the future and planning for your care. It generally involves legal documents, and it's a way for you to state your wishes and have those wishes carried out eventually for your caregivers and family.
And so making sure that those wishes are carried out, that people know what those are, especially if you're not physically able to communicate, that takes a bit of planning, right?
True.
So can you talk a little bit about how our viewers can make sure their wishes are honored?
Sure. Advanced care often relates to advanced directives or advanced planning. So when we plan estate planning, we include documents such as a living will and a durable power of attorney for health care. Those are also known as advanced directives, and there's two documents or one combined.
Okay, and so are living wills and advanced directives the same thing?
Living will is part of the picture. So advanced directives, for example, in Montana, we usually use a living will and a durable power of attorney for health care. In Wyoming, they generally have a combined document called the advanced directive. So yes, it's part of the entire picture.
Okay, and so what does a living will do?
A living will is the document that is your communication with your medical provider. So it's telling the medical provider, when I get to a certain stage in my life, when I am faced with an incurable disease or irreversible illness, or suffer from something that I'm not likely to recover from, then I choose to withhold certain life-sustaining treatment.
And so does that include a do not resuscitate or a DNR?
Our standard document does not include that. That comes more into play with the doctor's orders and the doctor directive. The standard living will is more about nutrition, hydration, medications, life-sustaining treatments.
Okay. And then I understand too that some states have online registries for advanced directives. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Montana has a registry for the directives, and that you can put those on yourself. You can submit those to the registry. Your legal counsel or healthcare provider can assist in placing those, and that is a central repository for those documents where your healthcare providers can access those wherever you are and get the documents that are necessary to know your wishes for your care.
And that's why it's a good idea to have those online, because you never know when or where something might happen.
Very much.
Okay, great. And so when you're putting these documents in place, do you need witnesses for that?
Well, it varies a little bit with Montana and Wyoming. Yes, you need witnesses on the living will and a notary for the living will document in Montana. And for the durable power of attorney, you want to have it notarized. You don't necessarily need the witnesses. Now, in Wyoming, I believe generally it's combined into the one document. And there you can either have two witnesses or a notary on the document. And I think the only other difference is, I believe in Wyoming, the living will, the withdrawing life-sustaining treatment, is not valid, not operative during pregnancy.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that durable power of attorney for healthcare. Can you talk about what a durable power of attorney does?
Sure. People, when they're doing life planning, sometimes they do a durable power for business and a durable power of attorney for medical. Those shouldn't be confused. So today we won't be talking about the business power for contracts and so on. Today we're talking about the medical, where you set forth your values in life, your wishes, what's important to you, and the most important part, I think, is to assign a person, to nominate a person to make the decisions and have full authority. When you are unable to make those decisions, someone can follow through on your directives for you.
Okay, and that's sometimes called an agent.
That's an agent, and also we often recommend, most people have a successor agent. So you have your agent, and if that person is unable or simply can't bring themselves to act under those conditions, you have a successor agent that steps in. And that person then has full authority to make decisions for you.
Okay, so can you talk a little bit more about that? What are some of those decisions, or what does the agent have access to that can help a person who's in a situation who needs that support?
The agent has access to anything that the patient does. So all documents, all medical records, all information, even things that are covered by HIPAA. So also the powers that you give when you're doing a medical power is to hire and fire medical care, to go into a hospital, to find palliative care, to agree to certain surgical procedures. And there are a few other things, like nominating a guardian. So in this document, often you say, if a guardian is needed eventually in my life at any time, I nominate the agent that's named in this document. So it's comprehensive. There's a lot of things in it.
Okay, great. We're going to take a quick break, but Alice is going to stick around. We hope you will too. We're going to talk about Pulse and the protections they offer right after this. Welcome back. With me is Alice Hinshaw. We've covered living wills, durable powers of attorney, and advanced directives. And now we're going to talk about physician orders for life-sustaining treatment, or POLSTs. So first of all, Alice, can you just explain to us, why are POLSTs valuable to have?
A POLST is incredibly important toward the last of life, the end of life. A POLST it says physician's order. It is the doctor's order and directive to medical providers. So this is the doctor talking, and it is how the caregiver is to react to certain situations.
Okay, so if I have advanced directives in place, do I need a POLST, or why would I still need a POLST? Advanced
directives are your statement of your wishes, your values, what you want done, and what's important to you. So it does give certain directives, but the POLST is the document that the doctor initiates, and let me step back for a moment. The POLST isn't generally done early on in life. The POLST is when there may be emergency situations and the doctor anticipates that those decisions are going to need to be made. So the POLST is like CPR, do not resuscitate. We've all heard people say what they want to do in certain circumstances. The doctor's order is what puts that into place. So you can speak with your doctor early on, and you can have that in your medical records, what you want the doctor to do in certain circumstances. Okay. But those things aren't generally covered in the first two documents that we discussed.
Okay. Can I use either advanced directive or a POLST to identify my agent or my power of attorney?
The POLST does not identify an agent. The POLST it's like the doctor writing a prescription or an order to the provider saying, do not resuscitate, CPR. The patient may sign that, the agent may sign that with the doctor. But that's the difference. So the durable power of attorney for healthcare is where you assign your agent.
Okay.
The living will does not assign an agent.
Okay. And if I have a POLST in place and my health condition changes, then what happens?
If the POLST is in place and your conditions change, your medical conditions, the doctor is responsible to react and to make adjustments for the care that you're going to receive. Now, taking that again a step back, the other documents, the living will and the durable power of attorney for medical, are living documents that you can change throughout your lifetime as long as you're competent to do so.
Okay.
So if your religious tenets change, if your life values change, or you want to change your agent, those documents are all subject to change throughout your life.
So this might be a little bit of a touchy topic, but can you use your POLST to request a physician-assisted suicide?
No. The POLST documents are intended to apply to a natural death, and so we have debates continually about physician-assisted suicide. Physicians cannot be involved in ordering the procedures that would hasten death for the purpose of suicide.
And what happens if I have a POLST and then I'm in a different state? Maybe I'm visiting and something happens.
First of all, if you have a POLST, probably you're not going to be doing a lot of traveling.
Okay.
Because you're in a condition where the doctor is making some final orders. Your other documents, however, you're right on. You need to take those with you. Take a copy with you when you travel, and that helps to give providers in other states some assistance in your decisions.
Okay, and so we're talking about putting these documents in place, but just to make sure people understand just how important these are, what happens if I don't have any advance directive?
Well, if you don't have these in place, someone has to make decisions. Somebody has to make the calls. And this puts your medical providers, your care folks, hospice or anybody else, and your family particularly, in a stressful situation. Because when you need these decisions made, somebody's going to make them. And the family members don't always agree on what mom or dad would want. So it creates stress amongst the family. It can create disputes that last a very long time.
Yeah, and that's hard.
So this is a gift that you're giving to your family by putting these into place.
Can you give us a few scenarios about when you talked about these being living documents? When are times when people might need to make changes?
Well, as I mentioned, if religious beliefs are often in the durable power of attorney for healthcare, and you state what your religious tenets are and how you want, for example, blood products, if you don't want certain blood products or procedures used. So that's something you would change. As we age, our life values change, and we get more resolute in what we want. And so oftentimes there are more clear statements made, and oftentimes it becomes more important for a person to say, I want to be treated with dignity, and these are the things I want.
Perfect.
So,
thank you. Thank you so much, Alice. Great information. Next up, we'll talk about some of the decisions that come with aging, illness, and end of life. Stay with us. Welcome back. With me now is Dawn Port. She is here to talk about some of the decisions that may have to be made in emergency situations and at the end of life. Welcome, Dawn.
Thank you very
Thanks so
much.
much for being here with us.
Yes, happy to be here.
So my first question is something of a scenario. If someone is in a situation where they've done everything they can, they've done maximum medical treatment, but they're going to die, it's going to result in death. What are some of the life-sustaining treatments that at that point they'll need to consider?
Okay, this is a very good question because we're frequently not very comfortable talking or even thinking about these kinds of things at the end of life. So some of the life-sustaining treatments that we can consider at the end of life, including cardiopulmonary resuscitation, would be the one that I think most people are familiar with.
CPR.
And most of us have this vision of what we've seen on television. We may not have ever seen anyone have this done, in real life, and so we take what we know from Hollywood. And there really are some risks that we need to consider when we're thinking about whether we want to have CPR done or not, and thinking about what is our quality of life now, what could be our quality of life after we have CPR if we survive that procedure being done to us. And some of the risks that we have to think about is, especially if we're frail and elderly and maybe have a chronic illness, those individuals are less likely to survive CPR. And they are more likely to have some kind of additional trauma that would make their quality of life, if they survive that procedure, not as optimal as even it was before that event. So those are some of the things that we really have to think about. Do I want to go through that kind of procedure and maybe have the possibility of having broken ribs, or maybe a fractured spleen, or not even surviving that event? And again, based on what we see on TV in Hollywood, everybody makes it through CPR. And the facts are really that if someone has CPR outside of the hospital, their chances of surviving are less than 5%. And if they have an event in the hospital where they need CPR, the chances of surviving and being discharged from the hospital and having a good quality of life afterwards is only about 15%. So we really have to think about those kinds of things. It's much more complicated than just whether you want CPR or not. Okay. And those are some of the things that your provider, whether it's your physician or a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant, will ask you about. Some of the other things that we think about at the end of life that are life-sustaining treatments are, do we want artificial nutrition or artificial hydration at the end of life? And there are some situations where people would really consider, this is appropriate. If you're having some kind of surgery or radiation for certain kinds of cancer, you may very well want to consider a temporary feeding tube to help give you nutrition during that time when it's expected that you won't be able to swallow for a while because of these procedures, but will be able to recover that ability after the procedures are over. Or a good example is someone who has a neuromuscular disease like Lou Gehrig's disease. And probably the most famous person we know about is Stephen Hawking. And he has lived for many years with that disease process. And he has a feeding tube that helps him have nutrition. Now, there's some cases where you maybe wouldn't want to consider that. If you had cancer and you were well advanced in the treatment of cancer and looking at the end of life, you may not want to have that sort of thing. Or if you have severe dementia, you may not want to consider having that because it's not been shown to improve a person's quality of life or prolong their life. So, providing nutrition and providing fluids is such a way of showing that we care for someone. It's a very social thing, and to not provide these things is a very difficult thing for families and individuals to think about not doing. But we know at the very end of life that people, after they can go for a long time without eating, and they really, especially after a few days, really don't notice that that hunger kind of disappears. And people worry about, oh, I'm going to starve to death, or I'm going to die from thirst. And IV fluids really don't change that perception of thirst. So there's other things that we can do to help people at the end of life for that. Another issue would be dialysis. Another one would be just looking at what can we do to provide comfort care at the end of life.
Okay.
So, does that help?
Yes, that's
Okay,
perfect. A lot of
okay.
information. We're
Yes.
actually almost out of time. Can you just quickly talk about what hospice care is, just super quick so people understand what that is?
Absolutely. The difference between palliative care or comfort care is the other thing people might know about. And hospice care is palliative care can be given any time during a time that a person is sick. Hospice is for the last about 6 months.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. That's all the
Yeah.
time we have. Thank you
Okay.
so much. I appreciate it. I want to thank my guests, Don Port and Alice Hinshaw. And remember to stay fit, stay well, and stay healthy for life with Healthy Living for Life. Thanks for watching.
Healthy Living for Life is brought to you by Mountain Pacific Quality Health. We'd love to hear from you. If you have suggestions for future programs, visit our website at mpqhf.org or call us at 406-443-4020. You can also catch us on YouTube by visiting our website and clicking on the YouTube icon. Special thanks to Fire Tower Coffee House and Roasters. Production facilities provided by Video Express Productions.